Rain tapped against the windshield of a rental SUV, the opening salvo for the hurricane off the Florida coast. Dr. Abigail Sanders may have made a huge mistake, but time was short and a decision needed to be made. Of course, that tropical depression turned into a Category 2 hurricane just as she showed up. It wouldn't stop her. It couldn't. This project was too important. It took up too much time and energy to prepare. Mountains of electronic forms and questionable business practices kept her from her goal long enough. She'd been preparing for years, even from college. Everything from her dissertation onward was focused on photosynthesis in animal cells. If she could amplify that process in phytoplankton, she could greatly increase their oxygen output and carbon intake. It would only take a slight gene manipulation. She didn't want to blow it out of proportion, but she really did want to help save the world in her own way. She received last-minute word that a lab was open. The college finally found a deal they could afford. Naturally, that meant hurricane season rates. But the deal was made, so she grabbed her freelancing brother and his girlfriend to aid her in the technical setup. They boarded a red-eye to the coast. Sure, there was a tropical storm on its way, but they could endure for a couple of days. They had work to do in the lab before the rest of the team showed up. At least, that was the thought when they left. She'd never heard of this place before, but the building was fascinating. A plexiglass-topped, white dome connected to an angular concrete structure. It was a relatively small lab with an organic seed garden inside, but outside, it looked like a bomb shelter. Probably a good thing considering the wind speeds on the way. The little island was full of swampy surroundings, spiky plants and shrubs under palms. Somehow it felt prehistoric, but that's South Florida. A large white box truck was already in the parking lot. It had a ramp down to unload freeze-dried specimens and nutrients for the pool garden. "Hey," Joe said. "There it is." Her brother Joe hopped out of the car as Abigail pulled up. Joe was dressed in casual shorts, with a ridiculous short-sleeve button-up in Hawaiian flower print. His collection of equipment, however, meant business. He grabbed a hulking backpack and threw it over his shoulder, then lifted another couple of black duffel bags with his free hands. His flip-flops popped against the ground as he scuttled toward the front door like a penguin under the weight. His girlfriend Maria stretched her arms in the air, exiting the car behind Abigail. "You need a hand, Abby?" "Just the groceries," Abigail said. Maria tied her silky black hair into a messy bun, where a pair of heart-shaped sunglasses rested. She helped grab a few bags after throwing her own backpack on. The girl was too pretty for Joe, who recently started dating her. But somehow, he found one that was his brand of weird, so Abigail was fond of her from the start. She wasn't half bad at data analytics either. Abigail was still getting to know her, but her instincts felt right. Joe was already chatting up one of the delivery workers, a tall black man in his 30s. The man took a break, sweating from the work and the Florida humidity. He sat against the wall and drank a bottle of water. "Hey, Dr. Sanders," the man said as Abigail approached. "I'm David. We spoke over the phone?" "Of course," Abigail said. "Hello, David." "Happy to help," David said, standing up and offering a hand. "Sure, thanks." Abigail handed David the groceries. We're about to wrap up on our end," David said. "Just need you to sign off on a few things, if you don't mind." "Of course," Abigail said. "And thanks for showing up with the storm off the coast. Between you and that boat taxi that got us here." David laughed. "No problem. Not the first storm I've seen. Didn't quite expect the sudden turn, but you guys should be okay. The roof up there is no joke. I think it's like bulletproof or something. This place has been here for a while." "Well," Abigail said, "at least we have that going for us." She finished signing the pad and walked inside with David. "Oh, and before we go," David said, "did you have the combination to the lab? It looks like someone locked it behind them." Abigail's stomach fell. "No, nobody mentioned a key or a password." She searched for her brother, who was already fooling with computers. "Joe, did you get a password for the lab? I didn't even realize it could be locked up like that." Joe looked confused. "No, nobody mentioned anything like that to me. I'll try the admin password and my password. They gave me some access to troubleshoot specialized stuff here. I'm checking these computers to see if I can get in." "I'll check the door for an interface," Maria said. "Maybe we just need to unlock it there." "Oh, I'm really sorry," David said, "but we do have to run before the storm lands. We've stacked everything inside the main area here. We can come back after the storm passes. You guys gonna be okay? Abigail took a deep breath. The storm was a calculated risk, but this was bullshit. No, it's okay. We'll be fine. We can get to the living quarters, right? Around the corner, David said. They circled the lab. Several bunks. There's a kitchenette around the corner here by a main work area. He apologized again, set the groceries down in the kitchen, then grabbed a dolly and headed out with the other men. Man, Joe said, these monitors are dusty. When was the last time this place was cleaned? Abigail needed to organize and unpack to clear her mind. She walked around the premises and checked out the living quarters. They seemed comfortable. After a while, she pulled her phone out and dialed the funding department at the college. They would need to either get a hold of the last inhabitants of the lab or get their money back. Maybe they had information she was missing. The phone rang. No one answered. She called again. Hello, UFF Research and Funding. This is Sarah. How can I direct your... to... Hello? Abigail said. Can you hear me okay? Hello, UFF... The call dropped. Seriously? Abigail stepped outside to dial back and run directly into a powerful wind gust. The surrounding trees and foliage shook as the atmosphere darkened. The storm was on her doorstep. She ran back inside as another powerful gust swept by in dramatic fashion. Well, I guess it's time then. Hopefully the building protected them from the wind the way it did a phone signal. It's all good, Joe said. You brought me here for a reason. Just another technicality to figure out. We'll get there, I think. We have troubleshooting steps left to try at least. Hey, come here, Maria said, waving toward the far wall in the room. You should check out what it looks like inside. Pretty awesome. Abigail gave in. Her team was trying hard to make her chill out. Joe is typically the problem solver. Also, he knew her. He knew her nerves were rattled by losing control of the situation, and for some reason, he always had that nonchalant attitude. He was right. She brought him for a reason. Okay, hack the door, Joe. She walked to the far wall of the building where Maria stood. More plexiglass lined this area of the building, overlooking the water gardens inside the lab. Let's see what we have here, Joe said. Doesn't look like it's taking any of my admin passwords, so maybe it will take just admin? Nah, no way. The monitor loaded a home screen. Babe, try admin. Maria typed at the door, then stood still for a second. She tapped the display pad a few more times. Uh-oh, bad news. I think we got locked out. Joe stood up with his hands on his hips. Well, dang. At least lockouts don't last forever. We'll just have to give it a break and try again later. Fine, Abigail said, exasperated. Looks like we'll just need to get through it tonight. At least we're safe from the storm. Anyone hungry? Oh, I am, Maria said. There's cookware here, right? There should be, Abigail said. Can't promise it's clean by the look of things, but I think there's a dishwasher here too. You two knock yourselves out, Joe said. I'm in hacker mode. Please, Maria teased. You got in with admin, and I think I will knock myself out. Thank you very much. She walked over to the kitchenette, where David set the grocery bags, and pulled out a box of macaroni. You might get fed, too, if you're lucky. She looked at Abby and shook the box playfully. You want some mac and cheese? Abigail smiled. Sure. Best leave it to Joe here with the mess. Yes, ma'am, it is, Joe said, tapping away at the keyboard. I'll let you know what I find. Maria dug through the cabinets and grabbed a pot. She started the stove top and cleaned her cookware, while Abigail fetched the salt. We can make sandwiches or whatever, too, but I've been craving mac and cheese since we bought it. Oh, by the way, she gave Abigail a mischievous look as she pulled out a couple of spiked seltzers from a bag. Might as well, she chided. Abigail shrugged and accepted the drink. Maria was spot on. She could use one. Sorry I freaked out, Abigail said, popping the top of her can. This is just important to me, and we risked the hurricane just to get here early, and... No worries, Maria said. I totally get it. Not fair. That's what the booze is for. We might have to do some extra manual labor, but to be honest, I'm just excited to work on a project like this. It feels like an adventure. Yeah, Abigail said. The two tapped the drinks together. Didn't expect it to be, but here we are. So, who was here before us? Maria said. Do you have any idea? I really don't, Abigail said. Honestly, I was just so anxious to get started, I didn't think much about it. We got the deal and moved forward like normal. It's a specialized place, rented out for those ocean gardens in the CRISPR system. They're maintained by automated systems and an occasional visit, I think. But they're mostly self-sustaining. Some of the tanks are regulated for coastal environments, coral reefs and that sort of thing. The tank in the back is more of an open sea environment. It actually drops down 20 feet or so. Nothing deep sea, but cool with moderate light exposure. I'm guessing that's where our little beasties will go? Maria asked. Yeah, Abigail said. Just open water ocean is all we need. I've nailed down the gene I want to tweak, and just nudging evolution a little bit in the direction we want. We just need healthy conditions to grow them. Then it's just a matter of measuring and documenting the carbon to oxygen output. No problem, Maria said. And then we release our creations upon the earth. You're a silly human being, you know that? Maria said. What is life anyways? You hungry, babe? Maria asked, calling a Joe from the stove. Come here, Joe said. I'm finding some wild stuff in these user profiles. Abigail looked at Maria, who turned the stovetop surface heat to low. The two walked back to the office area. Rain and wind smacked hard against the windows, blurring the outside world completely. The two monitors in front of Joe were filled with open files, notes, spreadsheets, a few windows of some sort of program. More bad news, Joe said. I tried to send an email. Looks like the storm knocked out our internet. I think it's satellite connected here too, so I just looked through folders to see what saved passwords they may have jotted down. It's kind of a long shot, but people could never remember their passwords. I found the app that controls the door, but nothing auto-populated in the password bar. So they just logged out and bailed? Mary asked. Yeah, Joe said. That seems to be the case. They were doing some weird stuff I can't quite place. What do you mean? Abigail said. Look, he said, pointing to the left screen. They keep mentioning the neural network, as if they're building an AI, but no hardware is remotely set up or something like that. They aren't feeding any data to anything, so I don't know what they mean by neural network, unless they're growing a brain in there. The lights flickered off and on, and the computer screens went black. A loading screen appeared, followed by a blue screen with a frowning face typed out. Joe said. What the hell? He let the system go through an auto repair. I thought this was supposed to be a smallish hurricane. There's backup generators here, right? They built this little bomb shelter with satellite Wi-Fi. Surely the power's not going to go out too. Yeah, there's backup power here, Abigail said. But considering the state of things, she gestured toward everything. Maria wandered over the transparent wall, watching the storm above the garden's dome ceiling. The sky looks crazy over here. Abigail followed her over. She hadn't quite taken a minute to take in the lab and garden, and it was actually quite beautiful. Some of the pools had coral reef structures. Others seemed to have self-sustaining ecosystems thriving with little human interaction. The dome overhead looked like it sat under a giant waterfall, with sheets of water flowing off the structure. Occasional lightning strikes lit the sky in wild patterns. On closer inspection, she noticed the tanks were quite active, with relatively large species of fish swimming around. What struck her as odd was that all the ecosystem tanks basically held the same species of fat, plant-eating fish that could be just found off the coast. It was as if somebody had a greenhouse and filled it with weeds. Maria screamed, a quick and sudden shock. Did you just see that? Jeez, Joe said. You made my heart skip. See what? I didn't see anything. The water in the back pool. The water in the back pool was splashing around its edges. Something slithered back in there, Maria said. Slithered? Joe asked. That's not what you want to hear. He looked back at the monitors, which were loading the home screen again. I'm going to go ahead and... He nodded toward the computer. Yeah, me too, Maria said. Abigail stood by the wall, staring at the back pool, while Joe and Maria huddled around the two monitors. Surely Maria just saw whatever wildlife was left in the tank. There's no telling what they have in there. The tanks were supposed to be empty. She couldn't believe the sheer incompetence of whoever was here last. And where are the lab owners? I seriously wonder if they were growing something, Joe said. If they made something dangerous, that would explain the locked door. He brought up a couple of spreadsheets. I came across these a little while ago. What do you think, Abby? Abigail walked over and scanned the documents. they're growing jellyfish cells, she said. I don't recognize the species, but I do know Cassiopeia is the family name for jellyfish. No way, Joe said. That would explain this Project Cassiopeia name then. Abigail said. I hope they're not keeping a man of war or something like that in there. Maybe that's why the lockdown was necessary. Those things are dangerous. Yeah, Joe said, but it's also connected to this AI neural network. They're calling it wetware. Gross. I've heard of this before with fungus. They're trying to compute with cells and neurons, I think. Jellyfish cells are the basis from the looks of it. No way, Abigail said, though she stared at the same data he was looking at. The rate of cell division was advancing far beyond normal mitosis. An eruption of thunder nearby shook the office windows. That would literally mean making an artificial brain. That's what I'm saying, Joe said. It's starting to freak me out. Do jellyfish even have brains? Maria asked. Sounds more like a brain made of jellyfish to me, Joe said, which also doesn't make sense. To answer your question, Maria, no, Abigail said. They have a nervous system and nerve cells, but no central brain. But I think Joe might be onto something. I find it hard to believe some sort of brain was actually achieved and left behind. Come on. I'm sorry, Abby, Maria said, but something big is really in there. I know I saw it move. Her eyes were wide. She was pleading with Abigail to believe her. Okay, Abigail said. I believe you. They did lock the door. We're all just a little out of it from the situation. Maybe an alligator got inside, you know? Pigging out in the tanks full of fish, finding shelter from the storm. Maria laughed nervously. An alligator? Yeah, that makes me feel much better about being trapped inside. She paced back to the wall, staring at the oceanic gardens. Well, at least an alligator can't open the door. Okay, Abigail said. We'll see if there are any incident reports. And that's the typical way we handle contaminations or injuries, stuff like that. Joe shrugged, apparently concluding a quick conversation inside his own head. He typed in the search bar at the base of the computer screen. No, nothing for this user profile. I wonder what these MP4s have to say. Looks like we have some recordings, but they were tucked away. Joe clicked on the video file and a media player window loaded. A man with a gray and black speckled beard and tired eyes leaned toward the camera. The lights were dim. He was recording at night. He kept his voice low. My name is Jonathan Baker. I work on a project called Cassiopeia. He hesitated. The look in his eyes suggested he was gathering his thoughts. Look, all I can do is be as straightforward as possible. This has grown into something unexpected. The cellular architecture we built quit responding to commands. It's a living creature now. It's just a jellyfish, a dangerous jellyfish, but yeah, just a jellyfish apparently. They won't tell us what happened to Marco after he came in contact. They just flew him out of here. And now, all I can think about is how they're going to cut the funding. All of this time and effort, I don't believe it. These fools are short-sighted and money-hungry, quick to call something a failure and move on. There's no way this organism grew at this rate with these variables and turned out to be simply a jellyfish. He shook his head. We're just supposed to leave, just like that. What are we even supposed to do with everything we found? Jonathan brushed his hand through his hair. I'm still not convinced the thing isn't intelligent. It just doesn't want to follow our commands. I don't know. This is crazy. They won't even let us pack up. We're being ordered to leave immediately. I'm leaving this behind with everything else and bringing a copy with me. If you're finding this, I'm sorry about the lab. Hopefully, you found this before the specimen, if it's even alive. The video ended. Who the hell are they? Joe asked. This is so shady. Like, seriously, what do we walk into? Another blast of wind made the entryway windows rattle. The lights flickered again, but this time they stayed off. A metallic click echoed through the stunned, silent room. Joe stood from his seat again, eyes searching the office. He moved toward the closest desk he could find and unplugged whatever was needed before dragging the desk toward the unlatched door. Dr. Abigail Sanders stood frozen. She couldn't take her eyes off the eerie oceanic gardens in the lab, which were now only lit every so often by lightning strikes above. Somewhere deep in her mind, she suddenly felt like Maria's fear was legitimate. Her gut completely rebelled against her rational mind. It began slowly, The water in the open ocean pool sloshed around and bubbled into a foam on its surface. She wasn't sure what she witnessed at first. Then the bolts of blue lightning gave her glimpses of an image. Pink tendrils emerged from the pool's edges, spilling out and growing further toward the door. Abigail almost screamed for Joe to stop, but Maria was way ahead of her. Joe stopped dragging the table and looked behind himself. Maria ran toward him, grabbing him and pulled him toward Abigail. A gelatinous form rose from the pool, a rounded blob. The figure dragged itself across the floor, gripping other tanks with its appendages and pulling its mass forward. Colors now emerged, sparkling in the center of the mass, glowing in the darkness. As the figure slid forward, the colors made a shape. A brain sat in the middle of the gelatin lump. Tendrils thumped against the plexiglass wall, some as thick as small tree trunks. Each appendage moved like an octopus tentacle. The creature pushed the lab door open, and the pink, stinging tentacles poured into the room. Abigail snapped out of her stupor as Maria nearly tackled her. The creature was already in the room with them, flinging the desk in front of it into the entranceway. "Abby," Maria said, "the kitchen." The three fled down the short hallway into the kitchenette to escape the flying furniture and stinging tentacles. Several of the pale tendrils slithered toward them, slowly exploring the walls mere feet away from Abigail. She held her breath, praying the creature didn't have any predatory interest in her. The tentacle-like stinger jerked and flinched as it neared their hiding spot, as if nervously responding to her presence. It slowly drew back as the gelatinous mass turned in her direction. Finally, the figure stopped. Only the sound of the storm blowing outside could be heard. The figure faced the kitchen. There was no eyes to speak of, but the light patterns in the brain changed as if excited by an electric current. Somehow, she knew it was focused on her. For a silent moment, the creature stood still. Its brain set signals and illuminated patterns across the wrinkled organ surface. Purple shifted to red, which then shifted back to purple, blue, green. The lights enthralled Abigail, even as her heart pounded in her chest. They bounced around like an old arcade game. "It's communicating," Abigail whispered. Joe was frozen, staring astonished. Maria was close by. Nobody dared to breathe. The creature turned, dragging itself to the entranceway. Wind rushed into the room. Rain pounded the ground. But the creature was undeterred. It squeezed its mutable body through the door and out into the raging storm. Abigail stood in silence, breathing heavily. Her brain felt numb, surreal, but something tugged at her mind, clawing at the data inputs she could gather. She had to remember the shape of the brain, the lights, the patterns. It was trying to say something, but she may never know what. "But what the hell did we just release?" Joe asked. "I don't know," Abigail said. "What do we do now?" Maria continued. "Do you think it'll come back?" "No," Abigail said. "I think it was trapped. If it wanted to stay, it probably would have. But it just dragged itself out into the storm." She took a deep breath and looked around the room. The power flicked back on as the backup generators spurted to life. "Well, I guess we can start growing our plankton now."